Hi, my name is Marcus, and this is a companion podcast for the CG Jung Helpdesk meetup group. I host live events on Zoom every 2 weeks about the concepts and ideas of the Swiss psychologist Carl Gustav Jung. Every event, I give a presentation about the Jungian concept, so have fun with this event's topic. And hello, everyone, to this special, very democratic topic, because it's on reality, and this topic came from a participant of the group. Because we have here some really smart and interested people who ask really, really good questions and really think about this stuff. And so I had a discussion with someone after the On Nature event and presentation, where he said, I understand now what nature is in this context. It's reality. And I thought about it and thought, no, not exactly. Like there's a difference. I think I wrote him some stuff, but the question stayed with me, and I thought, oh yeah, this is actually a very good question. Like, what does Carl Gustav Jung understand in the context of the topic reality? What is real? And he has some definitions for that. It's again a topic which is special in the sense of I can't point to a specific book. I can't even use a lot of quotes for this event, but rather it's like an underlying structure or premise that he's working with. And the one quote I could find, and which is the perfect description, is Wirklichkeit ist, was wirkt. That's the German version. And in English, it's saying real is what has an effect. So as soon as something affects you, it is real. It doesn't really matter what it is. So to dive into the topic, normally when people talk about reality, they choose a kind of objective measure. They say, okay, it's something outside. Like now it's a reality that Trump has won the election. Now they have a president and a government for the next 4 years. And there are other realities, like the sun is rising and all these things. So all these very outside things, also verifiable things, that we can have multiple people saying, oh yeah, the sun is rising, and saying, oh yeah, Trump is now president for the next 4 years. And this is then the view that most people take when they talk also about truth. Like, what makes something true? We want to prove it. And it's very easy to prove things in the outside external world, because you can check whether there's a country that's called China. You can travel there and see, like, oh yeah, and then China, they call themselves Chinese and say themselves they're in a country called China. And somewhere else on Earth, because I pretty much have to travel pretty far. This is all verifiable, and I can ask multiple people, like, have you heard of China? Yes. Have you traveled to China? Yeah. So this is then all about truth and reality. And this is very often in the context of something is outside and objective. But then we come into a little bit more complicated topics. And for those who are interested in John Peterson, one of the very first things he did, and this was right around the time when he slowly became famous, was this discussion with Sam Harris, where they could not even have the discussion because they were arguing about what is true, like a basic premise. And Peterson was already arguing a lot for like metaphors or stories, like the stories of Cain and Abel. This is true. There might not have been a true Cain or Abel, and it doesn't necessarily mean that this story happened exactly like this, but there is some truth in it, in a sense of it describes something about the world, about dynamics, and it has a kind of predictive behavior. It's a pattern. And this pattern, while we cannot really find it verifiably in the outside world, it still has a truth value. It has a reality value. It's something even that human beings are adapted towards. And so he tried to explain this to Sam Harris, and Sam Harris was like, no, like, we know that the stuff that is in the Bible did not really happen. Like many of the things, they are historically not true, and they scientifically don't make sense. So we should not take this seriously. And Peterson has been having this discussion for now many, many years. And just recently there was a discussion with Richard Dawkins, where they hit this exact same point again, where Richard Dawkins asked him, like, are Cain and Abel real? And is their story real? And Peterson said, well, it's hyper real. It's more real than real. It's possible that there were some guys, but that's not so important. Like, this pattern, this story happened in the past. It's happening right now. It's always happening, always from anew. And this is reality, and this is real. And of course, Dawkins said, yeah, I don't care. I want to know whether there were really two brothers called Cain and Abel and one killed the other, and God was the reason. So we're talking about something that is graspable, objective, outside, but also inside, true. This outside world, this external world, and this internal world. And in the internal world and the abstract world, which is also a topic of the philosophers, that you have some kind of meta reality on top of our reality, where you have, for example, these endless forms, these archetypes or prototypes, as Plato talked about. You have an ideal form there, which is not graspable, but can express itself in different ways in the world that we have here, in the external world. And Jung dealt with both of these worlds, with the external world and also with the inner reality. And the reason is pretty simple, because he was a psychologist. And psychology and the psyche, this is the stuff that you do and experience internally, that comes from the inside. And a normal question we can ask is, are dreams real? The things that happen when you lay down, close your eyes, and go into this very relaxed state, and you're having these experiences, these words, sounds, images, even stories, like complete characters that are happening to you, are they real or not? Like, they're not really in the outside objective world, but they have an effect on you. They affect you. They make you really wonder why I was dreaming this. They can make you really afraid that you have a nightmare, or you can have a wonderful dream. You have an emotional reaction to it the same way as you would have to have something outside. Like a lot of dreams that people have, they're being followed by someone, like a person that wants to hurt them, or an animal, or they're falling, or they're lost, or they're in a test, like in school in the testing environment. And they wake up sometimes in shock. And this emotion is real. It's a real reaction to something which is subjective, that happened inside. And if you go even further, and you have people who are, for example, schizophrenics, and they hear voices, it makes no sense to tell them, like, I'm standing right next to you. I don't hear voices. There can't be voices. Just ignore them, the voices that you're hearing. For the person and their experience of reality, or the things that are happening around them, this is true. And this is something they need to contend with, and they have to deal with. Also, when people have religious experiences and they're visited by, for example, an angel, or have this revelation of God, the question is then, okay, did this has really happened? There's a movie I had to think about recently again. It was Jodie Foster. It's Contact. And it's about this thing that you have this hard-headed scientist, Jodie Foster, who picks up a signal from outer space, and they found out, oh, this signal is actually instructions how to build like a teleporting device to create contact to aliens. And she goes in there in the capsule, and she meets this friend. I think they even become like a couple, who's very religious and talks about the experience of God and so on. And she says, like, yeah, how can you verify it if only you were there? Like, who would believe you? And this is just your subjective thing. Like, I'm a hard-headed scientist. I want to externally verify things. This is why I want to go to the aliens. And she goes into this device, and she has this incredible journey. And basically, she meets her dead father, who tells her about that and said, like, yeah, that's not how we really look like, but this is the way how you can understand us. And yeah, we will visit again in the future, basically. And she comes back, and she has to go in front of Congress and talk about what she experienced. And she's talking about this big stories, everything that happened to her. And then they show the video of the machine and say, like, yeah, well, you were gone for not even a second. Like, the machine did not work. And she said, yeah, of course it worked. I went there. And they say, no, it did not work. Like, everything we see here, the machine did not work correctly. Like, it was just a ball dropping down into water, and it was like a continuous fall. And then she had the exact same position that her boyfriend had. Like, I had this experience. I know it was real. I know it was significant. But nobody really believes me, because they were not there. They did not have the same experience. But for Jung, these experiences were real. And he took them very, very seriously because he was a serious person in regards of the subjective experiences of individual people. So this idea of the talking cure and talking through problems is only possible based on two premises. First is it's worth it to talk about problems. There's a way to solve psychological troubles through working and talking through them. And the second one, to take it seriously what was happening to the people. And this was fairly new with the psychology and psychoanalysis. And this was already Freud starting this and Jung becoming completely convinced of it. So Jung was a huge follower of psychoanalysis for many years in the beginning of his career. And especially with direct contact with Freud. And for this, you have to accept, okay, I'm going to listen. Like everything you will tell me, I will listen. And the disconnect that Jung saw, that like also in psychoanalysis, is when you don't open up and you don't talk about these experiences and even treat them as real, they will haunt you and will influence your life. So if you try to repress them and try to remove yourself from society, that this has a negative effect. You have these experiences and you need to process them. And a good way to process them is with other people. But for that, you need a partner. And Jung saw the role of the therapist in this setting really as someone who's there to listen and to support and take it seriously. And he had patients that would come to him and say, Dr. Jung, please help me. It might sound crazy, but I'm convinced that I have a snake living in my stomach and it's telling me things. And Jung would take these patients. And he was glad when a person would say that, because he would say, okay, I can help this person because it's clear there's not a snake in their stomach. They have this experience, but they also know, like, okay, can't be completely correct. This can't be completely valid that I have a snake that's talking to me in my stomach. So he already had an avenue for getting a patient also back into, let's say, a shared reality of the group and of society. And this is where he would just follow the patient. Like the thing that I always say, which makes Jung's very special, and I think like analytical psychology very difficult, is that he would say, okay, I will follow the patient where they want to go. So I would not lead them and make any kind of process or structure or method, but rather let them talk, let them explore and ask questions like an outside observer, just to point out specific things to them, like, oh, this is weird, this is strange. And this part is really necessary, this pointing out of things and getting like an outside perspective. Because in the end, it's not only important that you have kind of reality, but rather you have an adaptation to it. We are adapted to not one reality, but let's say reality. Everything we experience is already highly, highly, highly filtered. We think, okay, I see outside, I see the sun, I see the US election result, like, oh yeah, these things are all true. But what we see is the end product of a very long process of transforming, combining, separating, ignoring of information. There are millions of impressions coming every second, and we only pick up on a very small part of them because we don't have the bandwidth really to process that. And this then gets filtered through our psyche. And it gets also filtered through our psychology and our personality. Because as Jung said, you have these personality types who really like to think about the world. It's possible to think about the world and things that are happening, but it's not the only way. There's also a way to feel about the world or to intuit about the world or sensate the world. And these things have to be taken into account. So it might feel like the point where we have the experience that this is reality and this is absolutely true and this is unquestionable. But the process that happens before of all these different influences, this one can be changed because it gets filtered through the psyche, and the psyche is adaptable and changeable. It is possible then to also, of course, change the end product. Of course, first you have to find a way how to deal with the end product. Like if you're having horrible dreams about animals chasing you, like you have to find a way how to deal about it. And what Jung would do in this therapy would talk through their attitude, through their like bias that they have towards a certain topic. The psychoanalyst often would talk about it in context of resistances. Like if there's something you don't want to talk about, you have a resistance. Or if there's something that creates a strong emotional reaction, you have a complex. And by changing these things, you really transform the world because you change the way how you're perceiving it. So it's very hard to say like there's one objective world because we're not experiencing it directly in any way. Like we can expand this question, not only are dreams real, are the voices in the head real, but even are colors real? We experience them, like even all human beings to a certain degree, except for some medical problems, like they experience the world visually and they see colors. But at the same time, we are one of the very few animals who can do that. Like dogs can't see colors. Like most animals do not be able to see colors, but we can see colors. And we label them colors, even though that they're just specific wavelengths. So it's just electromagnetic waves, same as you have radiation from the sun as heat, or you have like from an atom bomb. From there, you have also a lot of radiation, harmful radiation. It's just like when you have a very specific wavelength, then human beings can perceive colors. Of course, because we have the eyes with the receptors, but also we have the psychic apparatus and the visual cortex for that to process that. But we don't really question colors. We only notice it, like people who are colorblind find out because they reference to other people and they're saying, oh, this is green and this is brown. And they say, no, it's the same color, it's gray. So we can't really see what we can't see, which is then, again, this idea with the unconscious and things are just not available to us in our current psychic apparatus. And the apparatus which is adapting to reality, to the experiences, this is consciousness. And this is the task of consciousness. And I have an example for that. When your body gets an infection and there's a virus coming into your body, there's this immune reaction that your body tries to fight off this invader. And the invader always has like a really weird specific form. And the thing is, you need like a counterpart that fits identically to destroy this virus that is in the body, all this bacteria, all this just foreign body inside your own body. And what the human body does, or like the bodies in general, they will just hammer out many different variations of a thing. So you can think about it like you have a kind of weirdly shaped ball, and there's something coming with these arms flapping around it and trying to grasp it completely. So a lot of different wiggly arms will come and try to touch it and try to get hold on it. And one of those will get a grip. And you have these other cells, the T cells, they're just watching, trying to see these interactions and seeing like, okay, what is better? And as soon as they say like, oh yeah, there's one version that can grip a little bit, so it's flapping around a little bit less, then make more of those, but do variations again and get closer, 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 closer until you really can grip it completely, and then you can destroy the virus. And then it's the thing that is produced by the body exclusively. And this process of iteration, trying, of adapting, this is consciousness, because consciousness can adapt very quickly, like compared to archetypes or instincts. It is, or emotions, like consciousness can do amazing things, structured behavior, plans, goals, preferences, and adapt very quickly to it. So it's incredibly. But at the same time, you're adapting to something, and the question is, what do you adapt to? And you adapt to your experiences. You're adapting to the things that you perceive as real. With your limited capabilities, like you cannot adapt to everything, but rather you try to adapt in a way that you can live your normal life and try to take one problem at a time. Of course, when you have too many problems, it becomes overwhelming. You cannot really go through this iterative process in a positive or quick manner. And consciousness does this constantly, but becomes then focused on something. And that, Jung said, is a problem. You can become one-sided. And one-sided means there are many different sides to the world and the way how to approach it, but then we are really focused on one. The same as the immune system, where we have a lot of variations, many different versions trying to solve the same task. As soon as the immune system sees like, oh yeah, this version is the best, suddenly only this gets produced. And the same with consciousness. When consciousness is then adapted to a situation and to circumstances, it's like, done. You don't need consciousness anymore because consciousness is for adapting and you solve the puzzle. But of course, if something new comes in and if there's always something new, your consciousness needs to adapt again. Like it needs to break a little bit and then heal again through this process again and again. And this process is of adapting is pretty challenging and can also be very hurtful, especially when it's not something you plan to adapt to and it's like overwhelming. Like Trump winning the election will be a really adaptive process for a lot of people now. So it is this way that Jung says, yeah, because everything gets filtered through the psyche and we don't really have a direct access to it, this explains how we can treat external things and internal things the same way. He says it's just a labeling. It's an information coming and we just label it like internal and external. And if we're smart, this is something you would help the patients with, to label things correctly. Like, okay, is this something really that happens in the outside world? Is really the CIA trying to kill you? Or is it maybe an experience you have internally? But for the psyche itself, he said, it makes no difference because it has an effect. People are reacting to it. Especially when you're not adapted, you have possibly a very strong negative reaction to it because he said, oh no, I don't want to deal with it. I will suppress it. I will put it somewhere else so I don't have to adjust to it. Or I will ignore it completely, or I will say like, oh, this is actually not that, it's something else. So I will try to deform it and not really take it seriously. Also to avoid this pain. And Jung says he has patients in therapy. Dealing with the complex means living it out. That means really opening up. So I read this recently because I was reading some letters of his. And he talked about this process of how this change of the psyche is happening. And very often it starts with this introspection part, also called autoerotic in Freudian psychoanalytic language. So everybody who's introverted is autoerotic. But it's like you feel like, okay, I need to spend some time with myself. I really need to look into myself and process something there. So people remove themselves from other people to spend time with themselves. Freud and Jung saw also the reason for depression, to isolate people and force them to spend time with themselves. And it is then that this chaotic process starts because suddenly these things that are supposed to be integrated but cannot be yet integrated start to flood. They become an experience. And this experience, Jung said, it can feel like a psychosis. Like you're going crazy. Like you're having all this weird stuff happening to you and you can't make head of and tails of it. And you feel completely overwhelmed. And you say, okay, I can't really do this. This is strange. Why is it happening? Why do I have to deal with that? And out of that, a new structure emerges. And this is then again also an experience. And he would notice that in a lot of his patients that they would have this vision of a mandala, of this symbol of unity and order and structure. And he said this already gave his patients a lot of hope because they had the feeling there is the possibility of union and structure and getting there. And then this gets integrated and then completed. And then it's consciousness that then again adapted to a situation, to something, until the next thing hits it. So this process never really ends. It's a constant death and rebirth of consciousness. And it's not fun. It's not fun at all. But it happens, and Jung looked into that and saw it all very positively because it is a process and it has an end and it has a positive end. And Jung's ideas are very positive. So he would talk to people with schizophrenia, people who were catatonic, like not reachable from the outside, that they were completely trapped in their fantasies and their visions and their hallucinations, that were lost in their own reality. But still, he would try to get into them and try to connect them and pierce these different parts of the psyche together. So he told the stories that he, through the talking crew, cured some people with schizophrenia, which is, of course, an incredibly strong claim that cannot be verified because it happened over 100 years ago. But like he was very, very optimistic about that and said it's just an incredibly tedious and long process. But he said, and this is one of the few quotes I have for this event, every point of view has an inner logic, and it is a reality. So it is real to the patients. They have to adapt to it, even though that it's not never ultimate reality. I think I've said that in the last events. So if you would try compare Plato to Jung, Plato would always say like, oh yeah, you're in the cave and you see the shadows and the shadows are not real. And you should rather go to the outside and see the sun and the true good and the real reality and the objective thing. And that makes you like a wise man, a philosopher, and that makes you like a valuable person. Like these persons should be in the top of the hierarchy of society because they see truth and they do true things and all these things. And Jung would say, yeah, rather you are in a cave because you just have limited knowledge and you don't actually understand what's happening and you're just accommodated in a way, but somehow you're forced outside the cave. And where you are is just another cave. It's just another reality, but it's already better than the one before. It's a nicer cave. It's maybe more sophisticated shadows, but that's not really the point and the target to go into objective reality and saying like, okay, I really need to go down to the most objective and true thing that there is. Jung said always, okay, try to live your life, like try to find the reality that fits. And let's build this, and building that through changing the psyche, through changing attitudes, orientation, making new experiences and talking about it and processing them and creating in such way a consciousness and a human being who's able to deal with all the tasks that life might throw at them. It's a process that never ends, but you can become proficient in it and grow and learn with it and be then in a direct contact with this reality and with the things that are happening to you, which to you are always real because you have a reaction to them. And everything you have a reaction to is real. That would be what Jung thought and talked about in the context of reality and how human beings are experiencing it, how they are processing it, how they deal with it. So to bring it back to the beginning, like nature is reality, the question that was there. In a sense, yes, everything becomes reality if you have to deal with it. And nature is a very big part that you need to deal with. But it's not everything nature that happens to you. Sometimes it's just you happening to you. And there's a really great quote from Nietzsche about that, and Jung really loved Nietzsche. You were looking for the heaviest burden and found yourself. And yeah, this is how I want to end my presentation, and I want to thank you for your attention and time. And yeah, I'm very curious about the discussion.
This was this event's topic. Thanks for tuning in. During an event, a discussion part follows after the presentation where all attendees discuss the just presented topic or other Jungian concepts. If you also want to join, find the group on meetup.com. The name of the group is CG Jung Helpdesk. Also make sure to subscribe to the podcast on the platform of your choice. See you next time.